is one of the most recognizable landmarks in Waterford today. Let's learn more about this building and its history.
The first mill in Waterford is believed to have been a grist and sawmill made of logs, built by Amos Janney on the west side of Catoctin Creek around 1738. By 1762, Amos's son Malin was operating a two-story mill of wood and stone on the site of the current mill, likely on the same foundation. After Malin's death in 1812, the property went through a succession of owners before Joseph White and Robert Braden acquired the property in 1817. White and Braden built the present mill to process the fine wheat produced in the fertile land of Loudoun County, completing it by June 1818. The new mill provided a technologically advanced answer to the demand for high-quality flour shipped around the nation and even to Europe and South America. They adopted the design for an automated mill developed by Oliver Evans in the late 18th century. The sturdy masonry mill was provided with a large wooden Hurst frame set below the first floor and designed to carry 3 sets of millstones and their gearing. The frame was intended to separate the mill from the vibrations of the machinery. The mill was further equipped with elevators and chutes that carried the grain to be cleaned, stored, and milled, and the flour to be processed, cooled, stored, and packed with the aid of the water-powered machinery and with a minimum staff. Braden operated the mill until his death in 1827. After Braden, the mill was owned or operated by Thomas Phillips of the Phillips Farm, followed by Samuel McPherson and Edward Bond, and then Nathan Walker, who was also the first president of Loudoun Mutual. Samuel Means leased the mill from Walker beginning in 1855, then bought the mill in 1859 for $6,000. Samuel Means was one of the most successful millers in Waterford up to that time. The 1860 industrial census of Loudoun County cites the output of the Waterford mill, indicating its efficiency in converting wheat and corn into flour and meal, and notes that the sawmill was capable of cutting 800 feet per day. The mill was altered to keep up with milling technology and to respond to the stresses produced on the building by its watery environment and vibrating mechanisms. In the period just before the Civil War, the east front and part of the south wall were completely rebuilt. Unfortunately, the Civil War and Means' participation as leader of the Union Cavalry Unit, the Loudoun Rangers, ruined his business. The mill transferred to Oliver Lance in 1868 as payment for Means' debt. The mill entered a period of transition in the 1880s. Ongoing structural movement, particularly at the west end of the south wall, was successfully addressed in the late 19th century by the installation of transverse tie rods at each floor just inside the west wall. In 1885, under the direction of J.F. Dodd, the milling machinery was entirely replaced to convert it to the newly popular and very efficient gradual reduction process, which passed and repassed the grain through steel rollers to squeeze a greater proportion of white flour from the grain than was possible with traditional millstones. The modernizations also included the addition of a 5-story receiving elevator building and a 3-story storage building, which had a capacity of more than 15,000 bushels. With the new technology, the mill could process 75 barrels, or about 245 bushels per day, with its 15-foot, 18-horsepower Fitz water wheel and a 23-inch turbine. Between 1889 and 1916, the mill was operated by A.S. Bates and W.M. Fling, and the mill was further converted first to steam power for emergencies and later to diesel. In 1916, the mill transferred to E. Mays and later W.S. Smoot in 1922, who operated the mill under the Waterford Mills brand. After Smoot's death in 1936, a series of operators attempted unsuccessfully to keep the mill in operation. The newly formed Waterford Foundation purchased the building in 1944 for $2,000. Hoping to save the original brick portion of the building to display crafts during the annual exhibit that later became known as the Waterford Fair, the metal and frame rear addition was removed and scrapped. The mill was first used for exhibits at the 1946 fair. Major repairs were undertaken over the next 60 years, including infilling of the tail race in 1949, installation of tie rods to further limit movement in the south wall, the addition of a set of fire stairs, and comprehensive restoration of the exterior building envelope in 1983 and 4. The infill of the tail race had increased moisture-related rot in the basement area, so the area was partially excavated in 1998. A comprehensive study of the building, called a Historic Structure Report, was completed by Studio Ammons in 2013 with funding from the Virginia Department of Transportation. The report recommended further excavation of the interior gear pit and external wheel pit, as well as the tail race to their original depth, in order to permit the interior of the building to drain properly and keep dry. It was also recommended to reconstruct the Hearst frame and isolate it from the building envelope, following the building's original configuration as an Oliver Evans-type merchant mill. A number of additional structural repairs were identified to stabilize the overall structure. A project is now underway with funding from Loudoun County to stabilize the building following the recommendations of the Historic Structure Report, with construction expected to begin in mid-2021. It is our hope that this work will enable the mill to stand proudly at the western edge of the village for many more years to come.